Hello everybody, I'm Seirian Sumner. I'm a behavioural ecologist in SEBA alongside Kate. I work alongside Kate, and this is one of the two contributions that I'm making to your course, your module on science communication. So you may or may not have had my session on women in science. If you haven't, it's all to come. But today this is a short video lecture on a little science communication, well, a science, citizen science, but also a science communication venture that I set up a few years ago with a colleague at the University of Gloucestershire, Adam Hart. And it's all about probably something you absolutely don't like at all. It's about wasps. So let me see if I can switch to the right screen. There we go. That should be it. Okay, so hopefully now you'll be able to see that screen. Great. Okay, so a big white screen says, "Why wasps?" And you'll be perfectly reasonable to be asking that question, because just like probably most people in the world, apart from a handful of crazy people like me, you probably don't like wasps. They are the gangsters of the insect world. They have inspired the most horrific and worst horror movies in the world. They are the thugs. They are the least welcome visitor at your picnic. You've probably been stung by a wasp, and you probably didn't like it. I don't like being stung by wasps either. But wasps are really important. They're really valuable in our ecosystems, and a lot of the other work that I do looks at the importance of wasps in ecosystems, and also how interesting they are in terms of their behaviour and their evolutionary attributes, and particularly in what they can tell us about the evolution of sociality. But that's a whole other lecture. Okay, so probably this slide might sum up how you feel about wasps. So this is, you should be seeing 4 different word clouds. These are word clouds that we amassed from words that people, from the members of the public, use to describe wasps, up here in blue, bees in orange, butterflies in yellow, and flies in green. We asked these members of the public to describe these different insects using 1 or 2 words. And then across 750 people, we then created these kind of quantification visualizations of how people feel about wasps relative to flies and butterflies and bees. And the words that people use to describe bees are really about their usefulness and their importance, their pollination, the fact that they visit flowers, they're endangered, they produce honey, the pollen, generally very, very positive words. Butterflies as well are very emotive descriptive words of beautiful and pretty and delicate, and caterpillars and colourful, and just beautiful words that make you feel all glowy and warm inside. Flies, nah, annoying, dirty, buzzy, yeah, you know, but nothing particularly strong, not strong feelings, that just a little bit annoying, like a small sibling. But wasps, whew, there isn't a lot of vocabulary used to describe wasps. Most people use 1 word, sting. I've always thought that's a very strange reason. I've never really bought it as an excuse for why you should hate wasps, because bees sting too. It's just the honeybee that can only sting you once, because its sting gets ripped out and stays in you when it stings you. All the other 22,000 species of bees can keep on stinging you just like a wasp can. So the excuse that you hate wasps because they sting does not fly with me. So why is it that we hate wasps? Well, the reason that we hate wasps is possibly because we don't actually appreciate the kind of services that they do for us. We tolerate the fact that bees sting because they're really important pollinators. But wasps, what do? Why should we tolerate them if they're so miserable and they're out to get us and sting us? As it turns out, wasps actually do perform a whole wealth of ecosystem services, really important roles in the environment that support directly or indirectly the quality of our lives. It's a very anthropocentric valuation of nature. They perform regulating services by eating the insects that you might otherwise hate even more than you do wasps, things like caterpillars and flies and other things that will be plaguing your crops. They perform supporting systems. They actually disperse seeds, for example. They have important cultural services. Did you know that wasps are some of the most popular source of insect protein for humans across the world? And provisioning services, this is incredibly important. They're very high, the larvae are very high in protein and very low in fat. So there is a very wide range of ecosystem services that wasps provide. So given all of this, why don't people like wasps, or at least tolerate them in the same way that they do bees? So this is the question we set out to ask in our public survey. And what we found is that the public value bees, but not wasps, for their ecosystem services. So this figure here shows, we asked people to rate the ecosystem service values, the ESV, of bees and wasps. And we specifically asked them to tell us how important, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important are wasps for pollination and bees for pollination. And then we also asked them to do the same thing for predation. So a score of 10 means this insect is super important for this ecosystem service, and a score of 1 means they're not at all important at all. A score of 0 means not important at all. So as expected, the public have an exceptionally good understanding that bees are pollinators. That was absolutely reassuring, that they all rated bees as very high ecosystem service value for pollination. Whereas wasps, no, the whole spread really, no real pattern there. People aren't really sure whether wasps pollinate or not. Between you and me, they do, but that's a whole other lecture. But let's look at this, predation. Okay, so the public have a really good understanding that bees do not hunt other insects. Okay, they're not predators, they're vegetarians. In fact, bees are just wasps that have forgotten how to hunt, but that's a whole other talk as well. Whereas wasps are actually predators. That's one of the main ecosystem services that they give us. And yet the public do not understand that wasps are important as predators, because if they did, this bar here would look identical to this one for the bees. Okay, so this tells us that the public do not understand that wasps predate, but they do understand that bees pollinate. What's also quite interesting is that when we add in how interested in nature they are, so we ask people to rate their personal interest in nature from 0, which means I never go outside and I hate the natural world, through to 10, which is I absolutely live for nature, I am out in the garden, I'm in the forest all the time. And what we found was that the ecosystem service rating that people gave to bees was not influenced by their interest in nature. So what that means is that even if you have absolutely no interest in nature, you still rate bees highly. You give bees a high ecosystem service rating. However, there was a significant effect, so this line is significant in the model, there was a significant effect of interest in nature on how well you rate wasps as an ecosystem servicer. So the more interested you are in nature, the more likely you are to appreciate that wasps are in fact really important in predation. But we can't blame the public for everything, because actually wasps turn out to be rather unpopular with scientists as well. I'm quite a rare breed of scientist in that I actually quite like studying wasps. Here we've summed up the cumulative number of publications on bees in red and wasps in blue, so we just got the top lines here, over the last 30 years. And you can see that there are an order of magnitude more papers on bees than there are on wasps. So we just don't like studying wasps. And if you even look at conference abstracts, which are often unpublished work, so say papers on wasps just don't get through peer review for some reason because they're a bit rubbish. This is not, this is the same pattern is still there, that most of the papers presented at conferences are on bees compared to wasps. And this is over different years of these meetings. So we can't just blame the public. It's actually the root of the problem is potentially the lack of scientific interest in wasps. So let's try and sum this up. There's a problem. The public lack appreciation of wasp ecosystem service value, and that kind of feeds into the fact that they've got no reason to like wasps, right? Because they sting. So I'm not going to like something that I don't understand that it has a role if it's slightly distasteful anyway. And this feeds into the fact if culturally we don't like wasps, then this would mean that wasps become unpopular as science topics for scientists, because even the scientists have grown up with the same culture that they just don't like wasps. And this ends up with wasps being little studied and a little appreciation of their ecosystem service value. And of course, then we get positive feedback here that there are no papers being published about wasp ecosystem services, and so there's no media coverage of it, and therefore the public don't actually get to hear about it. So it's a self-perpetuating problem with very little publicity. So what's the solution? Well, we need to try and boost the public image of wasps. And one way to do it is to use public outreach. There's been some really fabulous public outreach events about bees, promoting how important bees are for publication, for ecosystem services. So why can't we do the same for wasps? We need to generate a more positive wasp image in the media. And maybe by getting the public directly involved with wasp research, as they do with bees, planting your lovely wildflower gardens, maybe through that increased engagement with nature, that people will start to appreciate wasps a bit more. And in turn, this would promote scientific effort on wasp ecosystem service research, helping us understand the diversity and distributions of wasps, which could generate funding opportunities and eventually more experimental approaches rather than just descriptive approaches. So that solution would hopefully have an impact. It would help the public appreciate wasps a little bit more and dislike them less. They'll appreciate more of what they do. And then maybe wasps, this is a dream really, this is a future dream, maybe wasps would become more popular with scientists. There'd be more people like me studying wasps, and the ecosystem services would be much better studied and much better quantified. And therefore you'd have the same positive feedback with increased publicity. Okay, so this was the dream. We know that people hate wasps, it's the problem. The solution could be a citizen science project, which would then have the impact to alter how we view these precious insects and propagate more research interest into them. So this talk is all about a citizen science project that I co-founded, which is called Big Wasp Survey. And it's a little story about how we went. It was conceived purely as an outreach event, which then kind of cascaded into data and potentially too much data. So why do we need the Big Wasp Survey? Well, just to recap, wasps are important ecosystem services. Their populations are also declining, as are most insects around the world. And they really do need a PR, a public relations overhaul. So this is what the Big Survey set out to do. We tried to harness the power of the UK public to help scientists better understand this much misunderstood insect. So what did it involve? Well, we asked members of the public to make their own beer trap. And this is a standard homemade beer trap that any beekeeper might make to hang near their hive to keep wasps away from their bees. And it's just an upcycled pre-loved water bottle. You cut the top off, invert it, and put a string round it and fill it at the bottom with some beer. Beer is sweet, and anyone who likes drinking beer in late summer will know that wasps have a particular fondness of it. We asked the public to hang them in their gardens. Here's my youngest, who was a toddler at that time. trooping to the end of our garden to hang up our beer traps. It's perfectly safe for kids. And here's my daughter modelling her perfect wasp outfit here. We managed to get sponsorship from the Royal Entomological Society to help us run this, because actually we had no money at all. And this is Tom Heap here. He's a presenter from Countryfile. And in fact, he is the reason that this all happened, because Countryfile phoned me up, asked me to come on their programme to talk about wasps a few summers ago, and I said yes. And then near the time they said, well, actually, we don't want you to just talk about wasps, we want you to come up with something to get the people off their sofa doing something with wasps. And so this beer trap idea was just simply something to do on Countryfile for Countryfile listeners. And little did we know that it would actually really be a thing that people want to do, and it would end up, well, 4 years later, we're still doing it. So let's see what happens. We got a huge amount of publicity. Lots of radio interviews. We're on BBC Breakfast. It was phenomenal. People really absolutely were totally hooked on this wasp beer trap thing. I think it's because there's nothing else in the news at the end of August, at the end of summer. They're looking for something fun to do. And the kids, they loved it. They sent us photos of their artwork that they'd sent in to us. Look at this. All these pictures here are drawn by a whole class. They had a whole class of kids who all used this YouTube video to draw their own wasps, and it was just incredible. But I do want to draw attention to Hector. Hector, aged 5. Look at this. Look at those mandibles. They are spectacular. Hector knows the value of wasps as a predator. Hector is going to go far in life. He is going to be a champion for the ecosystem services of wasps. As well as artwork from children, we got a lot of media publicity, not all of it positive. In fact, I think the media was very bored indeed. And this is an example of how science communication can sometimes slap you in the face. It got us into the broadsheets. Conservationist slam hateful survey promoting wasp killing. The Big Wasp Survey encourages volunteers to build homemade traps and send dead wasps to entomologists. Oh, it's great. Public urge to drown wasps in beer and bizarre conservation project. Condemned by wildlife experts. These wildlife experts were Bug Life, and I think Bug Life had nothing else to do at the end of August, and so they just kind of hopped on this bandwagon. And what I did learn from this, actually, it was brilliant that we had this controversy, because it got us a huge amount of media coverage. But my top tip is never, ever read the comments on an online article, because they get a bit out of hand. These are some of the more polite ones. Kill them all. Perhaps we should hunt them with dogs. They went on and on. Anyway, it was lots of fun, and we ended up, Adam Hart, my partner in crime here, we had an article in The Conversation about the abuse that we faced from people when we asked them to kill wasps for science. And actually the idea of killing insects is often quite contentious, and it led on to Adam having a Radio 4 programme, because that's what he does. He does a lot of communication, science communication, a Radio 4 programme called Inside the Killing Jar, about why we do need to sadly kill insects in order to learn more about them. Okay, so thousands of people registered to take part in our beer trap Countryfile stunt. It was not meant to be like this. But we suddenly found that we had actual people collecting actual samples for us, and that we would have data. So all these wasps got sent to UCL, and my freezers have never recovered. In fact, they're still crammed with wasps now. But we had over 6,000 wasps from 559 traps sent to us from all over the UK. So in terms of getting samples of wasps across the UK, the Big Wasp Survey has done a fabulous job. But of course, we need to know, are the data any good? And one of the big problems with citizen science data is that it's often not very reliable. But luckily, we were able to compare our citizen science data, because all the actual specimens are sent to us and we identified them, so the experts identified them. We were able to compare the sampling done by our citizen scientists across the country with what is known as the gold standard for insect sampling in the UK from the Bees, Wasps and Ants recording scheme, BWARS, which is a recording scheme that's gone back over 40 years. And so this figure here shows you how biased the sampling is, because one of the problems with sampling for citizen scientists is you can't predict where they're going to sample and why. And this is my little boy, Theo. He's come to help. So what did we find out? So if the sampling of these beer traps is equally distributed across the whole of the country, this is what it would look like on this line here. This line here is the BWARS data, and this tells us that it's actually very spatially biased. In fact, most BWARS recorders are in the southeast of England, the south of England. This graph here shows you how good the Big Wasp Survey is. So the Big Wasp Survey is actually much less biased in terms of its distribution.
Mummy.
Would you like to go and find Reuben?
Mummy,
Yeah?
I want to go to Friday Fun.
All right. I'll just be a few minutes finishing this lecture for these students, okay? Yeah? Okay. Thank you, honey. Do you want to stay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Don't mind Theo. He's just here. Okay. So what this tells us is that Big Wasp Survey is doing a much better job at sampling across the whole country than the 40-year-old gold standard recording scheme. Whoops. We also were able to compare the species distribution modelling of the hornet, which is very well studied over the 4 years of Big Wasp Survey. And this distribution here shows you where the hornet is using 40 years of data. If you look over here, you'll find that the Big Wasp Survey does just as well. So the combination of these two together look very, very similar. So what this tells us is that 1 year of Big Wasp Survey data is equivalent to 40 years of this long-term data. So citizen science can work for uncharismatic species, and it can give us a really high level of participation, which results in massively media interest, generating high quality data, and the public really don't mind killing insects for science. So we've gone on and on with the 2018. We had media mayhem, we had radio interviews, TV interviews, more publicity in the papers. Can you put it on for me now? Just one. That's right. And even more people took part, and it was stupid. We had so many wasps in our freezers, and we had to resort in the end to, can we have the next slide? To having public identification workshops. And thanks to teams of undergraduates at UCL and actually some MRes students as well, just like you, they helped us run these workshops with members of the public. And we were able to double check the non-expert identifications with our own expert identifications, and they did remarkably well. So that was really helpful. Next slide, please. Big Wasp Survey has become part of my third year behavioural ecology course as part of the UCL connected curriculum. And we've had BSc students working on it every year. MRes students have the opportunity to work on Big Wasp Survey every year. We have a fabulous team every year. It's been such a sociable and really engaging project, which has helped us communicate the wonders of wasps to children, to toddlers, all the way through to undergraduates and master students like yourselves. Can I have the next slide, please?
Mummy,
Yeah. That's
you.
me, I know. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's happened in the pandemic? Hey, the reason that he's sitting on my knee is because I'm recording a lecture with children at home, and this is what the pandemic's done to us. We've had to adapt. And so what we've been doing with the Big Wasp Survey this year is our super samplers, so these are people who've been sampling our wasps every year, have agreed to try and identify their own wasps at home. So we put together a sort of ID pack for people to do it themselves, including lots of videos which will talk people through how to use the different features of the wasps in order to identify them. So it's a little bit like running our public workshops, but in your own home. So you can go and have a look at the resources that we've developed on our website there. Next slide, please. Brilliant. Okay, so the Big Wasp Survey, our agenda, it's turned from what was a publicity stunt into a proper research project, which is just crazy. In the short term, we're getting geographical distributions of wasp abundance and species composition across the UK. We were hoping to look at the effects of land use on their distributions and abundance. We might be able to detect where unfriendly immigrants, the invasive wasp, Vespa velutina, as it's moving up from southern Europe. And then in the long term, we see it as an annual event. This is the 4th year now. And it's just generating a fabulous data set, which is enabling us to potentially look at these long-term changes in population, abundance and distribution. Final slide, please, Theo. That's right. So we had the problem, which is that people don't like wasps. We have a solution, which is a citizen science project and public outreach using this communication of science to the public to engage them with a much misunderstood and unloved insect. And we're hoping that this is going to produce the impact to change people's perceptions of wasps, to appreciate the role that these have in our ecosystems. And the final slide is the end. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you've tolerated our little visitor here, who will be going to hang out his beer trap because we are just reaching the Big Wasp Survey period for 2020. I look forward to discussing with you more about Big Wasp Survey and the challenges and the successes that we've had over the years. Time to go.